All right, everybody. Good morning, quiet places. Today, I want to talk about Into the Wild and Me, both the book and the movie. So, I'm going to get into how this story inspired me, its relationship to my own travels. I think there's a lot to say there. Some of you may know this story, some of you may not. For those of you that don't know it, I hope you'll pick up the book or the movie because they're both really worth it. I think if you're into this type of travel. So, for those of you who don't know about the story of Into the Wild, in around 1990, a young man from Virginia, he had graduated college, Emory University, and he set out after graduation to the American West and traveled America as a hitchhiker, if you want to call it a tramp, a hobo, a vagrant. He lived as a vagrant for about 2 years. Ultimately, he ended up in Alaska, living out in the wilderness in Alaska, and he died out there either of poisoning or starvation. And just, if he poisoned, it was because of something he ingested, not because of some poison somebody gave him. He was living out there on his own. Eventually, this was done completely on his own. This was before social media. So his parents didn't know where he was. Really, nobody knew where he was. He went under a different name. His real name was Chris McCandless, and he went under the alias Alex Supertramp. Okay, so I guess he called himself a tramp too. So it's fine for me to call him that. 2 years he traveled out there on his own, working occasionally, having jobs, making some money, depending on the kindness of other people he met along the way. He kept some records, some photos, some notes. There's postcards. And when his body was found, eventually the author, John Krakauer, found out about the story, and it resonated with him because John Krakauer is a traveler himself, and he's done some real adventure travel in his time. And he wrote an article for Outside Magazine in the 90s, and eventually he wrote a whole book about Chris's story called Into the Wild, and it was later made into a movie by Sean Penn in the 2000s. I see it's become like a part of reading lists in school. So this is a story which has clearly resonated with a lot of people. I didn't know about it. I don't think I even heard of the book. I had heard of John Krakauer. I had heard of Into the Wild. I remember my mother read John Krakauer's book into thin air about an expedition gone wrong on Mount Everest, and she recommended that I read it, and I did, and I enjoyed it. This was in the 90s when I was in high school. So it happened to be that I was about 24, and just another night, I had a girlfriend, and we're in our apartment, and I think it was like a summer night, and we went out to rent a movie, because that was a plan that people had back then. For those of you who don't know, going out to the rental place, the most famous one was Blockbuster, and you'd walk out there or drive out there, and going to the rental place was an event in itself. It was a way to kill time, to look at different movies, kind of like going shopping with somebody. Well, it was going shopping with somebody. So instead of now where you go onto Netflix and it's all right in front of you, you'd have to drive out there and go through aisles and aisles of movies and different categories and come to an agreement about which movie you would rent. And you'd get the physical copy. It would be, at that time, on a DVD. And then you'd go back home and watch it. And that you could make a whole night of it. Sometimes get a couple of movies. And then eventually you'd have to go back and return it. And sometimes when you go back and return it, you get another movie. So it was just another night like that, and I happened to rent Into the Wild, the movie. This is about 2008. Like I said, I'm about 24. I didn't know anything about the story. I probably read the summary. There would be the cover of the DVD would be out there and have a summary of it. And it probably interested me. I don't think I could really figure out much about the movie from looking at the cover. I didn't really know what it was about, but it sounded interesting enough to me, about somebody traveling. I've heard those stories before, and they always pique my interest. So I watched it for the first time. We're watching it there at night, and I do remember watching it and enjoying it, but not to the extent where I felt like this story is going to be somewhat of a catalyst for my life and is going to really inspire me, and I'm going to really feel a connection with the main character in a way that I just normally don't. It took, the feeling that I can describe is that it took a while to sink in. I'm watching this story of this young man, somewhat around the same age I was, a little younger, recently graduated from college, and he probably had what would be considered a good, decent, comfortable life up until that point. There were family problems for sure, but materially he was well off. He had a good education, and he was probably on his way to what would be considered a materially good and possibly even well-rounded good life, American life. ahead of him. He had just graduated Emory University, which is a well-respected university. I had a friend who went there from my high school, which is not anywhere near Atlanta where Emory is. And that seemed to be his expectation. But he threw it, that seemed to be the expectation of his parents and probably people who knew him, I'm assuming. But he threw it all away. He actually donated a lot of his money to a charity, and he threw it all away. He threw away his family life. He had no contact with his family for years. When he died, his parents didn't know where he was. They hadn't spoken with him. They hadn't written to him. He was out there in such a way that it just wasn't known where he was. He was traveling through America anonymously. That's the extent that he went out there. So as time went on, this story really started to sink in, like I said. The idea of somebody going to that extreme lengths to rebuild a different life for themselves, I saw it can be done. And that he's not insane. Maybe there's even a logic to it. That he's starting out his life, he wants to live a certain way that's not the way that is common for somebody from his circumstances, especially. The idea of being a tramp. There's people who do that, who are addicted, have mental health issues. That's what I believe is normally thought of. People who do that, or people who have had a difficult life. It's not something that the average person would choose to do, especially somebody who's healthy and a college graduate. At that time in my life, I was at a similar circumstance. I had graduated from university a couple of years earlier. Now I went to law school for a semester. I failed out. The school actually kicked me out. They told me I couldn't return. They didn't want my tuition. That's how badly I did in law school. I only lasted one semester. And then I found myself out there. And my degree, I had a degree in economics. I had a degree in history. I did well in college. I wasn't really finding any... First of all, I didn't know what to do. In a sense, I had all the options open now, because once I was in law school, I was on a certain track. It would be unlikely that I would put myself through the financial strain and the time and the studying, the commitment of law school and not be a lawyer. I was going to get a JD. I was going to probably take the bar exam, and I would be considered an attorney. But now that was all blown up.
Following distance.
And to tell you the truth, I never wanted... I was okay with the idea of being a lawyer, but it was never something I really set out to do. I went to law school in part because I didn't know what else to do. And now I didn't know what to do. And I was looking for some kind of direction. After law school, I was unemployed for a while, and I eventually found myself into the insurance industry, working these low-level jobs. So back then, when things were less computerized and less digital, there were more of these type of jobs. You'd be considered an assistant, and I would do all these clerical tasks, mostly photocopying, putting files together for accounts, for insurance accounts. That's what I was doing for a couple of years at that point, but I still felt like I was drifting around. I felt like this is not where I want to end up. It was more a way just for me to support myself, have a job. But I was lacking direction. And I think seeing Chris's story, it showed me that there were a lot of different possibilities. Off the bat, I thought what he did was somewhat extreme, but I understood it, that he felt that if people knew where he was, knew what he was doing, it would encroach upon his mission to explore, to live out on his own. He spoke about killing the false being within, and that was his ultimate trip to Alaska, was the culmination of that by surviving out in the wilderness in Alaska, that he was killing this person within him. He was destroying what he thought about himself was false, was not true, was not who he really wanted to be.
Following distance.
And it failed, obviously. So it also taught me that I don't want to do that. I don't want to starve to death. And I don't think he did either. Maybe he made peace with it at the end. I don't know, because he starved to death on his own. I'm sure it was a horrible way to go. Even if he was poisoned, that's not a good way to go either. Dying alone in the Alaska wilderness, frustrated and lonely, because he did try to get out of there, and he couldn't because of a river. Even though, as people have pointed out, there was a bridge nearby that he could have used. So it also inspired me in the way that, as like a cautionary tale about how not going off embarking on some kind of mission like that is also very dangerous. Don't take it easily. That was the message to me. Don't want to starve to death in the Alaska wilderness. There's better ways to go, and it's going to prevent more adventures. So the story just started to resonate with me more and more. I'm starting to realize I love travel. I don't mind. I've liked some of my travels with other people, but sometimes I really like solo travel because I get to make up all the rules. I get to go where I want to go. Whenever I want to do it, I can stop when I want to stop. I can have lunch where I want to have lunch. I enjoy it. And I had started to realize that at that point, even before I saw Into the Wild, I had started bike touring, which is where I take a bike out and just travel all different places. I had done some organized tours. I had traveled through a lot of New York City on a bike tour, Suffolk County and Long Island, Philadelphia, the Berkshires in Massachusetts, Connecticut. And I'd actually been caught in a storm around this time in the Berkshires. I was on a bike, and I was completely unprepared for the temperature to drop, to be caught in a storm. We actually did have like cell phones. I had a cell phone with me, and I had called for help, and they didn't want to help me. I didn't have to. I probably should have just kept pedaling and eventually gotten through it. I'm not saying it was like the worst storm in the world, but I was unprepared for it. And it was my first experience seeing the power of nature. So I had already started to realize that there's risks in this type of travel, but I still wanted to do it. And actually, after my college graduation, I had traveled out to Italy. My parents, as a graduation present, had paid for a trip for me to go out to Italy, and I have some distant relatives out there, and I stayed with them. I did travel out there by myself, and I traveled a lot by myself in Italy. I've been out to St. Martin, but all these trips, like the bike tours, that was an organized tour with other people, and they actually helped guide you about where you needed to go. And in Italy, like I said, I stayed with relatives, although I started to travel a lot on my own. I went out to Vegas with a girlfriend at St. Martin. I had a friend who was there. I stayed with him, but I also was traveling on my own. So I was starting to travel in on my own a lot. But still, I think the idea of solo travel seemed unorthodox to me. It seemed like something maybe people just don't do. I'd never heard of it before. But seeing Chris's trip in Into the Wild really showed me that it can be done to an extent I never imagined. And the idea of going off the beaten track in terms of career, now I was seeing somebody who really did it to an extent that I didn't even think that I was going to go that far as he did. I think I may have even seen the movie again because I wanted to concentrate on it more. I started to think about it, and then in probably later that year or the next year, I bought the book and I read it, the entire book. And the book, of course, like a lot of books, when you watch the movie and then read the book, it's more in-depth. It goes more in-depth, not only into Chris's story, but also John Krakauer's story. And then I'm reading about John Krakauer and his expeditions and his travels. So now there's other people like it. And now it's opening up all these doors to me. John Krakauer also talked about other adventurers and solo travels of other people in history. So I'm seeing all these other people have done it too, and it resonated with them, and they enjoyed it, and it was meaningful to them. There's Thoreau, Jack London. So 2009, I'm in my mid-20s, so I'm not fresh out of college anymore. I'm still working these low-level jobs as an assistant. I have an apartment. I'm traveling. I'm still going out on the weekends. Still partying in a way like I did in college. Having a great time, hanging out with friends. Have my own place. Making some money, enough money to support myself and save money. I'm trying different things. I started talking to military recruiters. The idea of the military was appealing to me because of the idea of the U.S. military being not just having bases throughout America, but all over the world. And the idea that joining the military would not only give me the ability to finally have a career, whether it's in the military or having the military, using the military for training in a career which I could do after as a civilian, but giving me the ability to see the world, to see America. I had met people in the military. I had somebody I ran into from elementary school that I had went to elementary school with, who had joined the Coast Guard. He's telling me about Florida and Hawaii, and other people talking about the military in these far-flung places like Chad and Somalia and Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, there were two big wars going on at that time, so it was no joke. But it was one option I was thinking of. And then other career options I was thinking of. Do I stay in insurance and try to get a career in insurance? For a while, I was pushing for that. I was looking at other careers. I'm reading the book. I'm thinking, how extreme do I want to be? I'm looking at different kinds of travel. I'm traveling to different places. It's a time of limbo. I read also Jack Kerouac. Why am I drawing a blank about what his famous book was? But similar to Into the Wild, story about people tramping across America. Although his wasn't solo travel mostly. It was with other people, but also people with unorthodox careers and lifestyles. So that was where I was at around that time. And ultimately, I think I did say to myself, I have to do something like this. I'm getting close. I'm in my mid-20s at that point, 25, 26. So I'm seeing that the carefree times of the past, or I don't want to put it that they were carefree, but the time of my life, childhood, the remnants of childhood, if you want to call it that, the times of my life where I'm in school, I'm a child, not much is expected, I don't have to really make a living, that chapter of my life is ending. I'm going to have to make a living. I I don't want to just be an assistant in an insurance company forever. Something has to give. It's coming to that crucial point. I can't just go out with friends on the weekends forever. I'm getting older. So for my next step in life, it would be inspired by Into the Wild and these other stories. So I wanted to speak about this story and literature that was an inspiration for me, and I think I did go off on my own version of Into the Wild, and I'm really happy that I did. I have a book that I've been working on about this. It's finished, but I'm still editing it. It's going to go more in depth into this whole story. I see this video essay as like a prologue to it. So that's about it. I think it relates to this channel, Quiet Places. You can see the inspiration that this literature has had on my own travel, the things that I've done in the last few years that I've put on videos, and also well before that. And I'm going to document some of those things in different ways. I'm actually on my way. I'm traveling right now for work, and I have a long drive ahead of me, and that's why I wanted to make this video. So I hope you all enjoyed this. I'm not sure how it'll work out. I made one before, but I felt that I have a tendency to, sometimes when I'm speaking off the cuff, I say things like and and sometimes it's like kind of, and there's another one, kind of. It was cringy for me to listen to, if I'm using a very contemporary word. Okay, so I'm pulling over. Until the next one, that's it. Have a great day.